He changed the locks before I'd even finished clearing his father's funeral dishes. That's how I found out my husband Calvin inherited $50 million, by being thrown out of our home with a suitcase and a smirk. "The prenup you signed says it's my house now," he said, as if 2 decades of marriage were just an expired lease. But the real slap? Seeing my former assistant in his study window before the door even closed behind me. 22 years I built that man's empire. He left me with nothing. Except one thing he didn't know I kept. He needed me to disappear. Instead, I circled a date, Friday, noon, and waited. Because he didn't just throw me out. He triggered the clock. And now, I'm the only thing standing between him and the money. So when he came back, begging, all I said was, "You understand business. So do I. My name is Marlene Whitaker, and I'm 45 years old. Every morning for 22 years, I've organized Calvin Whitaker's business and social empire from our marble-floored study. My husband Calvin likes to joke that I'm just the smile behind his success, but I'm actually the spine holding up every record, receipt, and legal document that built his company. My sister Denise says I'm too meticulous, but keeping detailed files saved us more than once. Like that Renaissance painting I purchased. 3 years ago, Calvin never knew I kept the authentication papers separate from the artwork itself. Even my former assistant Jessica, who's been oddly close to Calvin lately, doesn't know about my private filing system. The funeral for Calvin's father, Charles, is tomorrow, and money has a way of revealing what contracts can't protect. But let me start from the beginning. Through the kitchen window, I watched dark clouds gather as I scraped funeral casserole leftovers into the trash. 22 years of marriage, and all I could think about was how Calvin hadn't touched his plate at the reception. He'd been too busy whispering with the estate lawyer. The front door clicked open, and I turned, expecting to see my grieving husband. Instead, I met a stranger wearing Calvin's tailored suit. His smile was different, sharp, calculated, like he was closing a hostile takeover. "Marlene," he said, rolling my name around like he was tasting something bitter. "We need to talk." I dried my hands on a dish towel, the same one I'd embroidered with our wedding date. "Of course. How are you holding up? Father left me $50 million. He loosened his tie, and that practiced smile didn't budge. "But there are conditions, the kind that make me reconsider certain arrangements." The air went thick. You know that moment when your whole world shifts, but your body hasn't caught up yet? "What kind of conditions?" "The kind that mean changes." Calvin gestured to a single suitcase by the door, my old burgundy Samsonite. "I've packed your essentials. The rest we can sort out through lawyers." My knees locked. "Calvin, this is our home." "My home," he corrected, checking his watch. "Purchased with my money, maintained with my salary. The prenup you signed makes that clear. Remember that Renaissance painting I mentioned? The one hanging above his head right then? I could have ended this right there. But 22 years of habit had me swallowing my words. You can't just... I can, and I am. He opened the front door. The inheritance requires certain adjustments. You understand business. I did understand business. I'd built half of his. 22 years, Calvin. That has to count for something. It counted for exactly what the prenup specified. He lifted the suitcase. You'll land on your feet. You always do. The marble steps were cold under my feet as I took the suitcase. Behind me, I heard him already on the phone with a locksmith. Through the window, I caught Jessica's shadow moving in his study. So that's how long he'd been planning this. I walked down our curved driveway one last time, past the rose bushes I'd planted when we first moved in. The thorns had always been Calvin's complaint. Now I understood why. He'd never intended to stay long enough for the flowers to bloom. My car started on the first try, thank God for small mercies. I drove across town to Denise's street, but couldn't bring myself to wake her. Not yet. Not while this still felt like a bad dream. I parked under a flickering streetlight and pulled out my phone. 22 years of photos, birthday dinners, anniversary, trips. Client galas where I'd smoothed his collar, whispered the right names in his ear, played the perfect corporate wife. I started deleting texts, all those working late messages that now read like warning signs. Lord, I whispered, fogging up the window, you see what men hide. You keep better books than any lawyer. The streetlight sputtered, casting shadows across my dashboard. I'm not asking for vengeance, just balance. A few houses down, Denise's porch light winked on, then off, her signal for late-night visitors. She probably saw my car. But I couldn't face her questions yet, not until I had answers of my own. I reclined my seat, pulled my old church shawl over my shoulders, and closed my eyes. The forecast had promised storms, and for once, the weather wasn't lying. Rain started tapping my windshield like nature's own sympathy. My phone buzzed at dawn, startling me awake. Unknown number. The text read, Ms. Whitaker, this is Harold Leonard from the estate firm. There's something you should know about your husband's inheritance conditions. Can we meet? The notifications started hitting my phone like little digital daggers around 8 a.m. First Chase, then Wells Fargo, then every account we'd built together over 2 decades. Your access has been terminated. Account status, restricted. Permission level, revoked. My thumbs trembled as I checked his joint accounts. 0 available balance. Calvin had been busy in the pre-dawn hours, systematically stripping away every penny I could access. 22 years of shared finances, gone in less time than it takes to brew coffee. Speaking of coffee, the rich aroma of Denise's signature morning blend finally lured me from the car to her front door. She took one look at my crumpled suit and pulled me inside without a word. Here, she said, wrapping her soft purple robe around my shoulders. Shower first, then we'll talk. I was halfway through my first sip of coffee when my phone screen went dark. No service. I tried rebooting, but nothing changed. Calvin had canceled my plan, the one he'd insisted we merge onto his corporate account years ago for the family discount. Use my tablet, Denise said, sliding it across her kitchen island. And stop looking like you're about to apologize for breathing my air. This is what family's for. My cheeks burned as I logged into my email. The shame sat heavy in my stomach, mixing badly with Denise's perfectly scrambled eggs. Here I was, 45 years old, taking charity from my big sister like I was 20 again, and between jobs. The company's Instagram feed loaded, and my fork clattered against the plate. There was Calvin, front and center, at last night's quarterly gala, his arm wrapped around a familiar waist. Tasha Miller, my former assistant, smiled up at him in a dress that probably cost more than my abandoned car. The caption read, Whitaker Corp celebrates record profits with CEO Calvin Whitaker and Director of Operations Tasha Miller. That low-down, scheming, Denise started, but I held up my hand. Let me think. I pulled out the mental ledger I'd been keeping since dawn. Hard assets in my name. The car. My grandmother's jewelry. The emergency cash box in my desk well, scratch that last one. Liquid assets I could access. Whatever was in my wallet. Maybe $200. The prenup, I murmured, remembering that sunny afternoon when love spoke louder than logic. I need to review exactly what I signed. Girl, that was 20 years ago. Denise's bangles clinked against her coffee mug. You telling me you remember what it said? I remember everything. I straightened my spine, feeling the old steel return, but I'm not moving until I understand the legal ground I'm standing on. I opened my email and composed a single clear message. Calvin, please confirm temporary support arrangements pending formal separation discussions. My personal effects remain in the house. Marlene. Professional. Dignified, like I was handling any other business. Transaction. The response came so fast, he must have been waiting. You left. I stared at the timestamp. 10:47 a.m. Not even married, 24 hours ago. And now he was gaslighting me via email. The sheer audacity of it made my teeth ache. Denise's doorbell chimed, the sound sharp enough to make me jump. Through the beveled glass of her front door, I could see a silhouette holding what looked like an official envelope. I'll get it, Denise said, but I was already standing. No. I pulled my shoulders back. Whatever's coming next, I need to face it head on. I spread the wrinkled prenup photocopy across Denise's granite island, my legal pad filled with calculations that made my stomach sink. You know that moment when numbers tell you exactly what you don't want to hear? This was worse. Let me get this straight, Denise said, peering over my shoulder. You're entitled to nothing? Not exactly nothing. I tapped my pen against the yellow paper. I get to keep my personal effects and any gifts given specifically to me during the marriage. The laugh that escaped my throat sounded hollow even to my ears. Though good luck proving what counts as a personal gift after 22 years. This can't be legal. Denise's bangles clinked against the counter as she reached for her phone. My friend Harold, you remember? Judge Leonard? He specializes in family law. Let me just... And pay his retainer with what? I pressed my palms flat against the cool granite, trying to ground myself. Calvin's frozen every account I had access to. Even my emergency credit card's been canceled. The memory of that declined gas station transaction still stung. Girl, please! Harold would... The doorbell cut her off. Through the kitchen window, I watched a courier retreat to his van, leaving a single certified envelope propped against Denise's front door. I'll grab it, she said, but I was already moving. Something about that official-looking envelope pulled me like a magnet. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, with Marlene Whittaker typed in precise letters. Not Mrs. Calvin Whittaker, not current resident. My name, my real name. It's from Blackwood and Associates, I said, sliding my finger under the seal. That's the estate firm handling Calvin Sr.'s will. Well? Denise hovered as I unfolded the letter. What do they want? I read the first paragraph twice, my heart picking up speed with each word. They need proof of marital stability within 48 hours to finalize Calvin's inheritance. Proof of what now? Stability. The will has a clause, I scanned further down, requiring both spouses to demonstrate ongoing marital harmony at the EB final disbursement hearing. My fingers tightened on the paper. Without it, the inheritance terms are void. Remember when I said earlier that I see patterns? Well, this was like watching dominoes line up in slow motion. Calvin hadn't just been cruel when he threw me out. He'd been desperate. He needed me to play happy wife for one more act before he could secure his millions. What time is it? I asked, suddenly alert. Denise checked her watch. Just past noon. Wednesday. Friday noon. I wrote it in block letters at the top of my legal pad. That's the deadline. For what? Denise leaned closer. Marlene, what are you thinking? I held up one finger, still reading. The clause was specific. Both parties had to appear at the final hearing. Both had to demonstrate their marriage was stable. Both had to sign the final acceptance forms. Both. Not just Calvin. You ever have one of those moments when the universe hands you exactly what you need? When all those hours of careful documentation and quiet observation suddenly add up to something bigger than yourself? I need to verify this directly, I said, already reaching for Denise's landline. If Calvin's trying to trap me somehow... Trap you? Denise snorted. He's the one who changed the locks. Exactly. I started a fresh page in my notebook. And I need to understand exactly why, before I make any move, he could twist around. My hand was steady as I dialed Blackwood and Associates. This wasn't about revenge, not yet. This was about understanding the chessboard before touching a single piece. Yes, hello, I said when the receptionist answered. This is Marlene Whittaker. I need to schedule an appointment with whoever's handling the Calvin Whittaker Sr. estate. Today, if possible. I felt Denise watching me as I wrote down the meeting time. She knew that tone in my voice, the one that meant I'd found my footing. 2 o'clock, I said after hanging up. That gives me time to change and review my notes. Your notes on what? I looked down at my legal pad, where I'd circled one phrase, verify clause in person. On everything, sister. I straightened my shoulders. 22 years of everything. I sat at Denise's kitchen table that afternoon, crafting the most careful email of my life. You know how sometimes the simplest words take the longest to write? This had to thread the needle just right. Professional but not cold. Cooperative without rolling over. Dear Mr. Blackwood, I typed, then deleted it. Too formal. I hope this finds you well. Delete. Too chatty. Finally, I kept it clean. Following up on today's letter regarding the Whitaker estate disbursement, I'd like to schedule a brief meeting to discuss appearance logistics for Friday's hearing. There. No mention of Calvin, no hint of our situation, just business. Denise peered over my shoulder. You sure about this? I need to see those documents myself. I hit send before I could second-guess the wording. 22 years of managing Calvin's calendar taught me one thing. Always verify the fine print in person. Remember those fancy corporate dinners I used to arrange? The ones where every place setting had to be just so. This was like that, but the stakes were my whole future instead of just a business deal. The reply came faster than I expected. 9 a.m. tomorrow available. Confirm? Perfect timing, I murmured, clicking accept. The confirmation printed on Denise's old HP, the paper still warm when I slipped it into a fresh manila folder. I spent the next hour laying out clothes on Denise's guest bed. Had to be just right. Nothing that screamed wronged wife or seeking revenge. I settled on a navy pantsuit, classic pearl studs, minimal makeup. The kind of outfit that says, I'm here for clarity, without saying a word. You ever notice how the night before something big seems to stretch on forever? I tossed on Denise's sofa, watching those red digital numbers crawl past midnight. Set 2 alarms on her old clock radio, even though I knew sleep wouldn't come. Easy. Marlene is seeking clarity, I practiced in the bathroom mirror around 2 a.m. Just clarity. The words felt right in my mouth. Neutral, professional, true. The prenup copy lay in its folder on the coffee table. I'd read it so many times I could recite the key passages from memory, but having it there felt like armor. Dawn finally crept through Denise's living room curtains. I was already dressed, double-checking my ID and touching the folder like a talisman. My sister handed me coffee in a travel mug, squeezing my shoulder. You got this, she said. Just clarity, I finished, managing a small smile. That's all I'm after today. The morning traffic downtown moved like molasses, but I'd planned for that. Pulled into the parking garage at 8:45, took those extra minutes to breathe deep and steady my hands. Remember when I mentioned God keeps score? Well, walking into that lobby at 8:55, I felt like maybe he was about to show his work. The security guard barely glanced at my ID before waving me through. Everything about the place screamed old money. Brass fixtures, mahogany panels, that particular hush that comes with serious wealth. The kind of place Calvin had always wanted to belong to. My heels clicked against marble as I approached the reception desk. The young woman there looked up with that professional smile I used to practice with Calvin's staff. Good morning. Marlene Whitaker for Mr. Blackwood? She checked her screen, nodded. Yes, Mrs. Whitaker, please have a seat. He'll be ready shortly. I perched on the edge of a leather chair, folder warm in my lap, watching that frosted glass door. Somewhere behind it lay answers. Maybe not the ones I wanted, but answers all the same. At exactly 9, the door swung open. Mrs. Whitaker? I stood, smoothing my jacket. One deep breath, one step forward. Please come in, the receptionist said, gesturing toward the conference room where the estate attorney waited. I crossed that threshold like I was walking into church, reverent, focused, ready to hear what needed to be heard. The estate attorney rose from his seat at the head of a long table. Mrs. Whitaker, thank you for coming in. I wasn't expecting Ms. Aria Benton instead of Mr. Blackwood, but her crisp blazer and clear-eyed focus told me she was exactly who I needed to see. Sometimes God sends different messengers than we expect. Mrs. Whitaker, please. She gestured to the chair across from her. I understand you'd like to discuss the appearance requirements for Friday's hearing? I settled into the leather seat, placing my folder on the polished conference table. Yes, I received notice about a joint verification clause, and I wanted to confirm the exact parameters. Ms. Benton nodded, reaching for a thick binder. The gold lettering caught the morning light. Whitaker Estate. My breath hitched slightly. Seeing our name there made everything more real. Let me reference the specific language. Her manicured fingers found the tagged section. The will is quite explicit regarding the final disbursement requirements. You know that moment when you're about to hear something important? When the air feels thick with possibility? That's how that conference room felt as she began to read. Section 7.3. Final inheritance disbursement requires joint spousal appearance to confirm marital unity and stability. Both parties must attend the verification hearing in person. No exceptions or proxies permitted. I kept my face neutral, my hands relaxed in my lap. 22 years of corporate dinners had taught me how to hold a poker face. And this hearing is scheduled for Friday at noon, here in our offices. She glanced at her calendar. Approximately 48 hours from now. The math was simple. No Marlene meant no money. All those years Calvin spent chasing his father's approval, and I held the power to derail it with an empty chair. May I have a copy of that clause? I asked, my voice steady. For my records. Of course. She pressed a button on her desk phone. Sarah, please bring in a certified copy of Section 7.3 and the hearing schedule. While we waited, Ms. Benton studied me with professional interest. Mrs. Whitaker, given your current situation, I want to be clear. Your attendance is entirely your choice. We simply need to document the requirements. I appreciate that clarity, I replied, choosing my words carefully. Any future attendance would be my independent decision. The door opened, and Sarah brought in the stamped papers. I tucked them into my folder, next to that old prenup that suddenly felt less threatening. Thank you for your time, Ms. Benton. I stood, extending my hand. This has been very informative. She shook it firmly. We'll note your inquiry in the file. Whatever you decide, the hearing starts precisely at noon. The elevator ride down gave me a moment to breathe. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying that electric smell of coming rain. I pulled out my phone and sent Denise a quick text. Confirmation in hand. I was so focused on that message, I almost walked right into him. Marlene. Calvin stood there in one of his $1,000 suits, clutching a bouquet of roses like some romance novel hero. The same roses he used to send to my office when he needed something. Amazing how different they looked now. What a surprise, he said, though we both knew it wasn't. He must have tracked my appointment somehow. Same old Calvin, always needing to control the scene. I held the door open, letting the wind whip my curls around my face. Good morning, Calvin. His eyes flickered to my folder, then back to my face. I've been trying to reach you. We should talk. The roses trembled slightly in his grip. I remembered a time when that uncertain look in his eyes would have melted me, made me rush to smooth things over. But that was before he changed the locks on our home. I kept my voice as neutral as the navy suit I wore. You have my email for any formal communications. Come on, Marley. He stepped closer, using my old nickname like a key to a door that no longer existed. Let's not make this difficult. We both know what's at stake here. The roses quivered in Calvin's grip. I've made some mistakes, he said, voice honeyed with practiced remorse. Let me take you to lunch. We can talk about a fresh start. I thought about those same words he'd used after forgotten anniversaries, after assistant promotions that should have been mine. The script hadn't changed, just the stakes. No, thank you, Calvin. I kept my tone neutral, professional. Any discussions about our situation should go through proper channels. His jaw tightened, that familiar twitch when someone didn't follow his carefully arranged scene. You're being unreasonable, Marlene. Think about what you're throwing away here. Like you threw away my clothes? The words slipped out before I could catch them. I took a steadying breath. Please send any communications in writing. Fine. His smile went sharp at the edges. But remember, clocks are running, and pride's expensive these days. I documented the encounter in my notes app before I'd even reached my car. Every word, every gesture, every shift from honey to vinegar, the timestamps would matter later. By noon, the texts started rolling in. This silent treatment is beneath you. We built this together. Don't tear it down. You're making a mistake you can't undo. I forwarded each one to Denise, adding them to our growing archive. When his voicemails turned from pleading to warnings, I saved those too. Each message was another brick in the wall between us, mortared with his own words. "Your sister's friend is here," Denise texted around 2. "The one I mentioned. Come home." Mr. Harold Leonard sat at Denise's kitchen table, his silver hair neat, his bearing judge room straight even in retirement. The legal pad before him already had crisp notes in precise handwriting. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, extending his hand. "Denise has shared some concerning details about your situation. Call me Marlene, please." I settled across from him, spreading out my own documentation, the clause excerpt, the text screenshots, my encounter notes. "Smart," he said, nodding at my organization. "You've been keeping receipts." 22 years of corporate training. I managed a small smile. Document everything. His eyes were calm, assessing. "Tell me about the inheritance requirements." I walked him through the clause, the timing, Calvin's rapid shifts between reconciliation and threats. Mr. Leonard's pen moved steadily, adding details in those precise strokes. "Here's what I see," he said finally. "Your husband is used to controlling narratives. Right now he's cycling through tactics, charm, guilt, intimidation, looking for the one that will make you fall in line. He has until noon Friday," I added. "Exactly." Mr. Leonard tapped his pen thoughtfully. "And that deadline will make him sloppy. Arrogant people often overreach when they're desperate." My phone buzzed. Calvin again. "Time is ticking, Mar." I showed Mr. Leonard the message. He nodded slowly. "Let him spin. Every threat, every manipulation. It's all evidence. Your power right now is in staying steady, documenting everything, and letting him hang himself with his own words." I grabbed my legal pad, writing in bold letters across the top. Friday 12th kin. Control. "What about the prenup?" I asked. "He's using that as leverage." "Prenups can be challenged, especially if there's evidence of coercion or hidden assets. But that's a battle for later." Mr. Leonard's voice held the weight of decades on the bench. "Right now, focus on the inheritance deadline. That's your strongest position." I set my phone to Do Not Disturb, creating a special exception for Denise and anything I needed to archive. My hands shook slightly as I adjusted the settings, but my resolve felt iron strong. "One thing's certain," Denise said, squeezing my shoulder. "Calvin's going to escalate before this is over." As if on cue, my email pinged, a meeting request from Calvin's lawyer for Thursday morning. "Urgent discussion of marital assets." "Right on schedule," Mr. Leonard murmured. "Let's see what the evening news brings." I reached for the remote, my finger hovering over the power button. Whatever was coming next, I had allies now. And more importantly, I had a plan. I clicked on the evening news just as Calvin's face filled the screen. He stood in his office, wearing the charcoal Armani suit I'd picked out last Christmas. The backdrop was pure corporate theater. City lights twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows, leather-bound law books arranged just so, even that antique globe I'd found at the estate sale in Charleston. "It's been a challenging transition," he told the reporter, his practiced smile firmly in place. "My father's passing left big shoes to fill, both in business and community leadership." My stomach clenched. I knew that expression, that carefully modulated tone. It was the voice we'd spent years perfecting for board meetings and charity galas. "And your wife?" the reporter asked. "There are rumors of separation during this difficult time." Calvin's face softened into something that might have passed for sadness if you didn't know better. "Marlene chose comfort over commitment years ago. The business demanded sacrifice, vision. She effectively abandoned our partnership long before my father's death. The air left my lungs. 22 years of late nights, canceled vacations, and perfectly orchestrated dinner parties, all rewritten in 30 seconds of primetime television. You remember those early days, he continued, gesturing around his office, when success meant 18-hour workdays and brown bag lunches. Some people grow with that challenge. Others retreat. My hands started shaking. Maybe if I called him now, agreed to appear Friday, we could contain this narrative before it spread. Before every charity board and country club member saw me branded as the weak link, the quitter, the coward. The thought rose like bile. Just show up, smile, play your part, buy the silence back. I recognized this moment, this undertow of doubt trying to drag me under. Mr. Leonard had warned me about it earlier. There's always a vulnerability dip when they go public. Let it pass like a wave. Don't fight it, don't deny it, just watch it crest and fade. So I sat with it. Let the shame and fear wash through me until my breathing steadied. Then I rewound the interview, not to torture myself, but to study it like the evidence it was. That's when I saw it. Behind Calvin's right shoulder hung an oil painting, a moody seascape I'd bought from a street vendor in Savannah 8 years ago. He'd sworn it was an undiscovered masterpiece, but I'd known it was a reproduction. Bought it anyway because the stormy waves reminded me of my grandmother's stories about the Carolina coast. But here's the thing about that painting. I'd discovered later it actually was valuable, just not in the way the vendor thought. The frame held authentication papers for another piece, a genuine Hopper sketch that had been missing since the 60s. I'd tucked the documents behind the backing, meaning to tell Calvin, but then his father got sick and everything accelerated and I sat up straighter, hit pause on the remote. There it was, hanging exactly where I'd placed it in his office years ago. The papers would still be there. Calvin never bothered with art except as status symbols. He wouldn't have reframed it or even straightened it without calling maintenance. Those documents were still there. Documentation I'd handled alone during our marriage, with clear dates and my singular signature. My hand was steady when I reached for my car keys. The vulnerability dip had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. Sometimes the best weapon isn't what you've lost, but what you tucked away and forgot to mention. I turned off the TV, Calvin's voice cutting off mid-sentence. Let him think he'd won the media battle. Let him believe his careful narrative was taking root. Behind that frame hung proof of exactly who had been paying attention all these years. And Friday at noon, he'd learn the difference between comfort and patience. I waited, in Denise's driveway, until the neighborhood went dark and quiet. You know that stillness that settles in around 10, when porch lights click off one by one, and even the dogs stop barking. That's when I made my move. The storage facility was one of those modern places with keypad entry and motion sensor lights. As I pulled up, memories of the rushed move-out hit me, Denise organizing while I wandered room to room in a daze, trying to decide what 22 years could fit in cardboard boxes. My hands were steady, though, punching in the code. Funny how clarity can snap back when you've got purpose again. Unit 247, I muttered, scanning numbers. The motion lights clicked on ahead of me, creating pools of fluorescent guidance. Remember playing hopscotch as a kid, jumping from one safe square to another? It felt like that, moving through those circles of light. There it was, our unit. Well, Denise's unit technically, since she'd put it in her name. Smart woman, my sister. The metal door rattled up with a sound that echoed through the empty corridors. The smell hit me first, cardboard and dust, and just a hint of the lavender sachets I'd tucked into everything. Denise had labeled all the boxes in her neat teacher's handwriting. Kitchen, master bath, living room, office decor, M. There, third stack from the left. I pulled it, forward, careful not to disturb the tower above it. The tape surrendered easily to my keys. Inside, wrapped in bubble wrap, lay the pieces of my old life, crystal paperweights, signed baseballs from charity auctions. That ridiculous modernist clock Calvin had insisted matched his executive aesthetic, but I wasn't here for memories. My fingers found the manila envelope at the bottom, still crisp despite everything. I settled onto the concrete floor, spread the contents in the harsh overhead light. The street vendor's invoice was on top, dated 8 years ago, my signature clear as day on the credit card slip. Below that, his handwritten certificate of authenticity for the reproduction, complete with my noted objection. Buyer acknowledges piece is decorative copy. Then the delivery receipt. I traced Calvin's signature where he'd scrawled it over my printed name, claiming the painting's arrival while I was at a charity luncheon. He'd done that more and more toward the end, signing for me, speaking for me, erasing me one small permission at a time. But here's what Calvin never understood. I kept everything. Every receipt, every transfer, every time he'd signed my name without asking. A whole trail of paper memories, each one a small betrayal I'd filed away without quite knowing why. Until now. I pulled out my phone, opened the scanning app Denise had installed. The street vendor's invoice first, timestamp clear in the corner. Then the authentication sheet with my notes. The delivery receipt with Calvin's obvious forgery. Next came the company asset transfer logs I'd printed that afternoon, showing painting after painting moved into corporate ownership, all with my supposed consent. Each one signed in Calvin's hurried hand, thinking no one would ever compare dates or styles or question his authority to speak for his wife. The prenup copy slid in next, then the estate clause requiring our joint appearance. Everything neat, ordered, time-stamped. A story told in paper and ink, leading to tomorrow's hearing like breadcrumbs through a dark forest. My phone buzzed as I finished the last scan. Mr. Leonard's reply was immediate. Received images. Pattern established. Be ready, 11:30 a.m. I repacked the box, carefully, making sure everything looked undisturbed. The metal door rolled down with a final clang, 11:47 p.m., glowing from my dashboard clock as I locked up. Tomorrow, courtroom, I whispered. More prayer than promise. Back at Denise's, I set 3 alarms, 7, 7:15, and 7:30 a.m. No chances, not with this much riding on perfect timing. The sofa cushions had stopped feeling like a temporary bed and more like a battle station. I smoothed my folder of evidence one last time before tucking it into my briefcase. Friday morning crept in like a held breath. The sky outside Denise's window was the color of old pearls. Fitting, since I'd chosen mine to wear today. 22 years of special occasions stored in that little velvet box, and now here we were. You ever notice how time moves differently on important days? Like it's stretching and snapping all at once? I stood in front of Denise's bathroom mirror, smoothing my navy dress, the one I'd worn to countless charity galas and board meetings. My reflection looked back steady, composed. Nobody looking at me would guess I'd spent the last 2 nights rehearsing this moment in my head. You look ready, Denise said from the doorway, holding out a fresh cup of coffee. That's my sister, always knowing exactly what I need. I am. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth settle my stomach, though I keep checking this folder like it might sprout legs and run away. The packet sat on her kitchen counter, each document arranged in precise order. I went through it one more time, touching each page like a rosary. The estate clause requiring both our presence, the prenup Calvin thought would muzzle me, the street vendor's invoice with my legitimate signature. The authentication sheet declaring the painting a reproduction felt almost warm in my hands. Funny how simple paper could carry so much weight. Then that delivery receipt. Calvin's hasty scrawl over my printed name jumped out like it was written in neon. 8 years of him signing documents in my name, each one a small theft I'd cataloged without knowing why. Until now. Mr. Leonard's summary page tied it all together. One clean narrative of systematic fraud. My phone buzzed with his message. Court opens 11:06. Be there. 11:35 sharp. I checked my watch. 10:45. Just enough time. Need me to come? Denise asked, but I shook my head. This part I had to do alone. The drive downtown felt surreal, like I was watching someone else navigate morning traffic. The courthouse loomed ahead, all granite and columns. I'd been here before, but never like this. Never with truth tucked under my arm like a weapon. 11:35. Exactly when I pushed through the heavy doors, the security guard nodded as I passed through the metal detector, my heels clicking against marble in that particular way old courthouses have. Like every step matters. The clerk barely glanced up as I signed the observer log. 2 rows back, that was Mr. Leonard's advice. Close enough to hear everything, far enough to watch it unfold. I settled into the wooden bench, folder centered on my lap. Calvin sat up front with his lawyer, all expensive suit and rigid shoulders. He hadn't spotted me yet. Probably thought I was still hiding at Denise's, waiting for his next move. The clock on the wall seemed to mock us all, its minute hand dragging through molasses. 11:55, 11:56, 11:57. My hands wanted to shake. Funny how bodies remember fear, even when minds are made up. I pressed them flat against the folder and took 3 slow breaths, just like Mama taught me during thunderstorms. Count it out, baby. Storm. Can't last forever. The clerk's voice cut through my memory. Matter of Whitaker Estate. Final disbursement hearing. Calvin and his lawyer stood. The judge peered over his glasses, scanning papers before him. Before proceeding, we require spousal confirmation of marital unity. Mrs. Whitaker was notified. That was my cue. I stood, keeping my movements deliberate, unhurried. Your Honor, Marlene Whitaker present. Calvin's head whipped around, so fast I thought he might hurt himself. I watched panic bloom across his face like spilled ink. 22 years of marriage, and I'd never seen him lose control of his expression like that. Before these proceedings continue, I said, my voice clear and steady, I have material evidence the court should examine regarding certain misrepresentations. The folder felt warm against my fingers as I stepped toward the bench. Behind me, I heard Calvin's chair scrape against wood as he stood. The court will hear statements, the judge said, adjusting his glasses, though I note counsel's assertion of marital unity seems premature, given Mrs. Whitaker's presence and demeanor. You know that moment when you've spent weeks planning something and suddenly you're living it? Time gets weird. Everything sharpens up like someone's adjusted the focus on reality itself. Your Honor, I request to be sworn, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the now silent courtroom. What I'm about to present requires sworn testimony. The clerk stepped forward with a Bible. I placed my hand on it, took the oath, and felt 22 years of quiet documentation transform into justice. Mrs. Whitaker, proceed, the judge said. I opened my folder, spreading key documents across the lectern. Your Honor, I'll be brief but thorough. The will requires both spouses present to confirm marital stability before distribution. I'm here not to confirm stability, but to prevent a fraud upon this court. Calvin's attorney started to stand. Your Honor. Let her speak, the judge cut in, leaning forward. Remember how I said time gets weird? Well, it crystallized completely as I laid out 8 years of Calvin's creative paperwork. This delivery receipt shows the first instance, I explained, pointing to Calvin's hasty signature over my printed name. The date aligns perfectly with his first major asset transfer, documented here. I placed the bank records alongside it. The pattern continues through multiple transactions, I continued, each one repapering our joint assets without my knowledge or consent. But the painting authentication sheet provides the clearest timeline. I presented it with steady hands. I purchased this. Reproduction alone, retained all documentation. Yet 3 weeks ago, Mr. Whitaker claimed full ownership during asset division, using, again, my forged signature. The courtroom had gone so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. The judge studied each document, his expression darkening. Calvin sat frozen, like a statue someone had dressed in an expensive suit. Your Honor, his attorney spoke up, voice strained. We request a brief recess. To what, counsel? The judge interrupted. To examine evidence of systematic fraud? To explain why your client attempted to finalize this inheritance while actively destroying the marital stability it requires? That's when Calvin's lawyer did something I hadn't expected. He gathered his papers and stood. "Your Honor, given these revelations, I must withdraw as counsel. I cannot continue representation under these circumstances. Have you ever seen dominoes fall? Not the game pieces. I mean really fall, like when a child bumps the table during a complex pattern?" That's what happened next. The judge ordered an immediate freeze on all distributions pending a full fraud review. The estate lawyer, Ms. Benton, requested copies of everything for the firm's investigation. Even the court reporter seemed to be typing faster than usual. I gathered my documents with the same care I'd used, presenting them. My hands didn't shake at all, though honestly, they probably should have. Through the wooden doors behind us, I could hear commotion building in the corridor. Someone must have tipped off the press about Calvin's inheritance hearing. "Mrs. Whitaker," the judge said as I turned to leave, "the court appreciates your preparation and composure." I nodded my thanks, tucking the folder securely under my arm. The voices outside grew, louder, questions being shouted, cameras clicking. Calvin still hadn't moved, staring straight ahead like he was trying to wake up from something. "All rise," the clerk called, and I straightened my shoulders. Through the doors, I could make out fragments of reporters' shouts. "Mrs. Whitaker! Allegations of fraud! Inheritance in jeopardy!" 22 years of playing the perfect corporate wife had taught me how to handle press, but this time, I wouldn't be managing Calvin's image. This time, I'd be telling my own truth. I reached for the heavy wooden door, ready to step into the flash of cameras and the fire of questions. The folder felt solid against my ribs, every paper inside a brick in the foundation of my new life. The courthouse steps looked like feeding time at the zoo, a frenzy of microphones, cameras, and shouted questions, all competing for the first bite. I kept my expression neutral and my stride steady, just like I'd coached Calvin to do 100 times before. Funny how life circles back sometimes, isn't it? "Mrs. Whitaker, did you know about the fraud? Was this planned revenge? What evidence triggered the freeze?" I held up one hand, another move from Calvin's old playbook, and spoke just loud enough to carry. "No comment at this time. Please respect the legal process." Then I walked straight through their midst, letting their questions crash against my silence like waves on a breakwater. Behind me, I heard Calvin's voice rise above the chaos. "This is a simple misunderstanding." I didn't turn around, but I didn't have to. The courthouse plaza had 4 massive screens showing local news feeds, and Channel 7 was broadcasting live. I watched Calvin adjust his tie, a nervous tell I'd tried for years to break him of, as he faced their camera. "My wife is understandably emotional about recent changes," he was saying. "But these allegations are—" That's when Tasha appeared, clicking into frame on those designer heels she'd started wearing after my departure. She grabbed Calvin's elbow, whispered something that made his face slack, then stepped back and found the camera with practiced precision. "I want to be absolutely clear," she announced, each word sharp as glass. "Any relationship between Calvin Whitaker and myself is terminated, effective immediately. I will not be associated with financial fraud or marital deception." She paused, letting that sink in. "And Calvin? Don't call me. Ever." The crowd actually gasped. I'd forgotten how much people love live drama. Tasha's exit was perfect. 3 quick steps, a hair toss, and gone. Calvin stood there looking like someone had just stolen his script mid-scene. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with notifications. The breakup was trending, complete with side-by-side shots of Tasha at last week's gala and today's exit. Someone had already made a gif of Calvin's face when she walked away. I was about to silence the alerts when a text from Ms. Benton appeared. "Impressed by today's clarity. Consulting opportunity available? Call me." Remember what I said about time getting strange? Well, standing there in the plaza, watching Calvin's world implode on 4 giant screens while a top estate firm offered me work, that moment felt like God's own signature on a cosmic receipt. I saved Ms. Benton's message and let myself smile. Just once, just small. 22 years of managing other people's narratives had taught me exactly how valuable my skills were. Funny how Calvin never seemed to notice that. The sun was already low when I opened my rideshare app. I punched in coordinates I hadn't visited in months. The old beach house turnout. 10-minute stop, then downtown, I told the driver when he arrived. The coast road unwound like an old film reel, each curve carrying memories I'd stored away for too long. You know that moment just before sunset when everything goes gold? That's how it looked when we pulled into the turnout where Calvin had proposed 23 years ago. Back then, I'd thought that marble and money meant security. Now I knew better. I'll just be a few minutes, I told the driver, then walked down to where waves were painting the sand copper and rose. I opened my palm over the surf line. My wedding ring caught the last light, one final flash before I let it fall. The tide was coming in. You could feel it in the way the beach leaned forward, ready to be remade. A wave rolled in, drew back, and just like that, the ring was gone. No drama, no ceremony. Just the clean math of the ocean. What you release, it carries away. I knelt at the water's edge, letting the cool dampness seep through my navy slacks. Behind me stood the beach house where we'd spent our first decade. All clean lines and picture windows, now belonging to someone else's story. Funny how places hold memories even when the people in them change, isn't it? The ring felt heavier than I remembered as I rolled it between my fingers one last time. 22 years of marriage compressed into a simple gold band that had witnessed everything. The careful climb, the polished smiles, the slow drift I'd tried so hard to ignore. I set it gently into the wet sand, watching how it caught the fading light. You know what they say about pride coming before a fall? I murmured to the incoming tide. Well, yours just came with a double serving, Calvin. First, there was the legal avalanche. $50 million frozen faster than a winter storm, with fraud investigators circling like hawks. I'd seen his face when the judge said, "Immediate suspension of disbursement." That same look he used to get when a big deal slipped away, only this time there wasn't going to be a next quarter to make it up. But it was the second blow that would hurt him more. Calvin had always cared about the show, about how things looked from the outside. Now there he was, live on every screen in the plaza, watching his carefully crafted image shatter while Tasha Miller, his hand-picked replacement for me, turned those designer heels right back on him. Don't call me ever. Simple words, but they might as well have been daggers the way they stripped him bare in front of all those cameras. A larger wave rushed up, nearly touching the ring. I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite grief, not quite relief. Maybe it was just the weight of 2 decades finally finding its way out to sea. I'd carried it for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. Rising, I smoothed my slacks and touched the 2 papers in my pocket. The court receipt that marked the end of one chapter, and Ms. Benton's message about consulting work that opened another. 22 years of managing Calvin's image had taught me every trick in the corporate playbook. Now those same skills would build my own path forward. The water was moving faster now, that mysterious shift that happens when the tide really starts to turn. I watched the next wave slide in, smooth as silk, lifting the ring from its hollow in the sand. For just a moment, it gleamed there in the surf, all that history caught in a single golden circle. Then the water pulled back, and it was gone. Clean, seen, final. I took a deep breath, feeling my lungs expand with air that tasted like salt and new beginnings. The rhythm of my breathing matched the waves now, steady, certain, owned. This wasn't the ending Calvin had scripted when he changed those locks, but maybe that was the point. Some stories need to be rewritten from the ground up. Standing there on that beach where he'd once promised me forever, I thought about how money moves people. Or maybe how it reveals who they've been all along. Calvin had his millions for less than a week before he showed his true colors. Now those same millions were locked away while he faced fraud charges, and his Golden Girl replacement had walked out on live TV. I turned away from the water, already reaching for my phone to call a ride. The sun was setting behind me, painting everything in shades of truth I hadn't seen in years. You want to know what I Learned from all this? Here it is, plain and simple. Money can't buy peace when your soul's on layaway.